The rifle felt like a lead weight in my hands, its cold metal biting into my palms as I stood at the edge of the Appalachian Trail. My breath fogged in the crisp October air, and I could hear my heart pounding louder than the crunch of leaves under my boots. I was 19, and this hunting trip with my dad's old friend, Buck, was supposed to make me a man, whatever that meant. I'd never been big on hunting. Growing up in a small Virginia town, I'd spent more time sketching in notebooks than aiming at deer. But Dad insisted. "You need to toughen up, Jamie," he'd said, his voice gruff over the phone from his trucking route in Ohio. Buck, a burly ex-Marine with a laugh like gravel, was his solution. So here I was, shivering at dawn, pretending I knew how to load a shotgun. Buck slapped my back, nearly knocking me over. "Ready to bag your first buck, kid?" he boomed, oblivious to the dread curling in my gut. Then I saw him, the stranger. He stepped out of the mist like he belonged to the forest itself, his leather jacket scuffed and his dark hair catching the first rays of sunlight. "This is Eli," Buck said, nodding toward him. "Friend of a friend. He's joining us." Eli's eyes met mine, sharp and warm, like he could see right through my borrowed camouflage. I froze, caught in a feeling I couldn't name. The trail stretched ahead, winding through pines that whispered secrets in the wind. Eli walked beside me, his stride easy, his rifle slung casually over his shoulder. "First time hunting?" he asked, his voice low and smooth, like a song I hadn't heard before. I nodded, my throat tight. "Don't worry," he said, a half smile tugging at his lips. "It's not about the kill. It's about knowing who you are out here." His words hit me harder than they should have, stirring something I'd buried deep. Buck led the way, his stories of old hunts filling the silence, but I barely heard him. My eyes kept drifting to Eli, his quiet confidence, the way he moved like he was part of the earth. I wasn't supposed to notice these things. Not about a guy. Not in a town where different was a dirty word. But every time Eli glanced back, his gaze steady and kind, I felt the ground shift beneath me. We set up camp by noon, a clearing near a creek where the water sang over smooth stones. Buck was off checking traps, leaving me and Eli to gather firewood. "You don't talk much, do you?" Eli said, tossing a branch onto the pile. I shrugged, my cheeks burning. "Guess I don't have much to say." He laughed softly, and the sound made my chest ache. "You will," he said. "Give it time." That night, under a sky stitched with stars, Eli told me he was from Asheville, a city kid who'd found peace in the mountains. "I come out here to feel free," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "No one telling me who I should be." I stared into the fire, my hands clenched. Free. The word felt like a key to a lock I didn't know I had. The next morning, we tracked a deer. Buck was all business, his eyes scanning the brush, but Eli hung back with me. "You ever feel like you're hiding something?" he asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet. I stopped dead, my breath catching. "What?" I managed, my voice barely audible. He looked at me, his eyes searching. "Like there's a part of you the world doesn't get to see." I wanted to run, to deny it, but something in his gaze held me there. I nodded, just once, and it felt like confessing a sin. By the third day, I was a mess. Every brush of Eli's shoulder, Every shared glance sent my pulse racing. I'd spent years dodging questions about girlfriends, ignoring the whispers in my head, but Eli was pulling them to the surface. That afternoon, as we sat by the creek, he handed me a smooth stone he'd found. "Keep it," he said. "Something to remember this by." His fingers grazed mine, and I swear the world stopped. Buck's voice broke the moment, calling us back to camp. But as we walked, Eli's words echoed in my head. "Know who you are out here." I didn't know yet, but for the first time, I wanted to find out. The forest seemed to close in around us as the days blurred together, each moment with Eli carving itself into my soul. I'd wake to the sound of his quiet humming, a soft melody that felt like a secret meant just for me. By the fourth day, I was hyper-aware of him, his laugh, his steady hands, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. It was torture, and it was everything. Buck was oblivious, his focus on the hunt. He'd ramble about deer patterns or the best way to clean a rifle, but I was barely listening. My world had narrowed to Eli, to the way he'd nudge my shoulder when I fumbled with my gear, his touch lingering just a second too long. "You're getting the hang of it," he'd say, but I wasn't thinking about hunting. I was thinking about how his voice made me feel alive in a way I'd never been. That afternoon, we stumbled on a deer trail, fresh tracks pressed into the damp earth. Buck was ecstatic, whispering orders like a general. Eli and I followed, my heart pounding not for the deer, but for the way Eli's arm brushed mine as we crouched in the brush. "Steady," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. I couldn't tell if he meant my aim or something else entirely. We didn't get the deer. Buck cursed, blaming the wind, but Eli just shrugged. "Sometimes you let things go," he said, his eyes locked on mine. I swallowed hard, feeling like he was talking about more than the hunt. Back at camp, Buck cracked open a beer and launched into another story. But Eli and I slipped away to the creek again. It was becoming our place, where the world felt quieter, safer. "You ever think about leaving this town?" Eli asked, skipping a stone across the water. The question hit me like a punch. I dreamed of it, fleeing the suffocating stairs, the church sermons that made my skin crawl, but I'd never said it out loud. "Yeah," I admitted, my voice shaky. "But where would I go?" He looked at me, his expression soft but fierce. "Anywhere you can be yourself." That night, as Buck snored in his tent, Eli and I sat by the fire. The air was thick with things unsaid. "I know what it's like," he said suddenly, his voice low. "Hiding who you are. Feeling like you're betraying everyone just by existing." My breath caught. He knew. Somehow, he saw the truth I'd buried under years of shame. "How did you?" I started, but the words died in my throat. He reached out, his hand resting on mine, warm and steady. "Because I've been there," he said. "And I got out." I pulled my hand away, panic flooding me. I don't," I stammered. But Eli just waited, his eyes kind. "You don't have to say it yet," he said. "But you don't have to hide it either." I stared at the fire, my chest tight with fear and something else, hope. Maybe. For the first time, I let myself imagine a life where I didn't have to pretend. The next morning, Buck announced we'd move deeper into the forest. "Big game out there," he said, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. As we packed, Eli caught my eye, his expression unreadable. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, but I wasn't. I was teetering on the edge of something I couldn't name, and every step into the woods felt like a step toward truth or disaster. The deeper we went into the forest, the heavier the air felt, like it was pressing my secrets into my bones. Eli's words from the night before echoed in my head. "You don't have to hide." But hiding was all I knew. Growing up in a town where fag was a slur tossed around like confetti, I'd learned to keep my head down, to smile at the right times, to never let anyone see the real me. Yet here was Eli, peeling back my defenses with every glance. We hiked for hours, Buck leading with a map and a mission. Eli stayed close, his presence a quiet anchor. When we stopped to rest, he handed me a canteen, his fingers brushing mine. "You're thinking too hard," he said, a teasing edge to his voice. I forced a laugh, but my stomach twisted. What was I doing? Falling for a guy I just met, in the middle of nowhere, with my dad's friend 10 feet away. It was reckless. It was terrifying. That afternoon, we found a clearing where the sunlight spilled through the trees, painting everything gold. Buck was off scouting, leaving Eli and me alone again. "Tell me something real," Eli said, sitting on a fallen log. "Something no one else knows." I froze, my heart racing. "I don't know what you mean," I lied, but he just waited, his eyes steady. Finally, it cracked. "I draw," I said. "Not just sketches. Real stuff. People, faces, feelings." I braced for judgment, but Eli's face lit up. "That's beautiful," he said. "You're an artist." No one had ever called me that before. The word felt like a gift, and I clung to it. We talked for hours about his life in Asheville, his love for music, the way he'd left his own small town to escape the weight of expectations. "I'm gay," he said simply, like it was the easiest thing in the world. My breath hitched, but he didn't push. He just let the truth sit between us, soft and undeniable. That night, a storm rolled in, thunder shaking the ground. Buck cursed the weather, but Eli and I sat under a tarp, our knees touching. "You don't have to be scared," he said, his voice barely audible over the rain. "Not with me." I wanted to believe him, but fear was a habit. Still, when he reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. His touch was a lifeline, pulling me toward something I'd never dared to want. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the tension hadn't. Buck was restless, determined to find game before the trip ended. As we tracked through the mud, Eli stayed by my side, his presence a quiet rebellion against the world I'd known. "You ever think about what you'd do if you weren't afraid?" he asked. The question burned, because I was afraid of my dad, my town, myself. But with Eli, I could almost imagine a different life. The final days of the trip felt like a countdown. Every moment with Eli was a spark, every glance a question I wasn't ready to answer. I was falling for him, and it terrified me. I spent my life building walls, but Eli was tearing them down, brick by brick, with nothing but kindness and a smile that made my chest ache. Buck finally got his deer on the 6th day, a clean shot that left him crowing with pride. I should have felt something relief, maybe, or excitement, but all I could think about was Eli, standing a few feet away, his eyes on me instead of the kill, You did good, kid, Buck said, clapping my shoulder. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere, tangled in the truth I couldn't ignore. I was gay, and Eli was the first person who made that feel like a gift instead of a curse. That night, as Buck cleaned his gear, Eli and I slipped away to the creek one last time. The moon was full, casting silver light over the water. This is it. Eli said, his voice soft. Back to reality tomorrow. I couldn't speak, my throat tight with dread. Reality meant my town, my dad, the life I'd been faking. I don't know how to do this, I admitted, my voice breaking. Be me. Eli turned to me, his eyes fierce. You're already you, Jamie. You just have to let the world see it. Then, before I could think, he leaned in and kissed me. It was soft, tentative, but it set my world on fire. I kissed him back, clumsy and desperate, my hands trembling against his jacket. For the first time, I wasn't hiding. I was alive. But the moment shattered when Buck's voice boomed through the trees, calling us back. Panic surged through me, and I pulled away, my heart racing. Eli's hand found mine, squeezing gently. It's okay, he whispered. We'll figure it out. But as we walked back to camp, I felt the weight of the world settling back onto my shoulders. The next morning, we packed up, the silence between us heavy. Buck was oblivious, joking about the hunt, but Eli's eyes kept finding mine, full of questions. As we loaded the truck, he slipped a piece of paper into my hand, his number, scrawled in messy handwriting. Call me, he said. When you're ready. I nodded, but fear clawed at me. Ready for what? A life I didn't know how to live. Back in town, the world felt smaller, the air thicker. I carried Eli's number in my pocket like a talisman, but I didn't call. Not at first. The memory of his kiss burned in my mind, but so did the fear of my dad's disappointment, of the town's judgment, of losing everything I'd known. I went through the motions: school, work at the hardware store, church on Sundays. But every night, I'd pull out my sketchbook and draw Eli, his eyes, his smile, the way he'd looked at me like I was enough. Weeks passed, and the ache grew. I'd see his face in every crowd, hear his voice in every quiet moment. Finally, one night, I couldn't take it anymore. I dialed his number, my hands shaking. Jamie, he said when he answered, his voice warm and steady. I was hoping you'd call. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, and with every word, I felt a little braver. Eli visited a month later, driving up in his beat-up Jeep. We met at a diner outside town, away from prying eyes. You're still scared, he said, reading me like a book. I nodded, ashamed. But I don't want to be, I said. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. Then don't, he said. You don't have to do this alone. I told my dad a week later. It was messy tears, shouting, silence that cut deeper than words. But I stood my ground. Eli's voice in my head, you're already you. Dad didn't understand. Not yet. But he didn't kick me out. It was a start. I moved to Asheville that spring, crashing on Eli's couch until I found a job at an art supply store. He taught me to play guitar, and I taught him to sketch. We fought. We laughed. We fell in love. A year later, we went back to the mountains, just the two of us. The creek was still there, singing its same soft song. I pulled out the stone Eli had given me that first trip, worn smooth from months in my pocket. I was so lost back then, I said, my voice thick. Eli wrapped his arms around me, his warmth steady against the autumn chill. You found yourself, he said. That's what matters. I wasn't perfect. I still carried scars from my old life, fears that crept in at night. But with Eli, I was free not from the world, but from the weight of hiding. The forest had changed me, not because of the hunt, but because of the stranger who'd seen me for who I was and loved me anyway. And as we stood by the creek, I knew I'd spend the rest of my life chasing that freedom, one brave step at a time.